Rick and Nick's excellent adventure has returned. It is episode 28. Halloween is in the air. So many awesome things happening right now. And we are going to kick it over to start just to hear how things are going with Dr. Rick. Dr. Rick, what can you tell us about life in Tennessee?
Well, life in Tennessee is similar to life all over the United States. Of course, folks from all over the country and all over the world tune into the excellent adventure, and we're so happy about that. And folks all over the world are prepping, at least we're prepping at this time of recording. We're prepping for a big holiday coming up, Halloween. We're thick in the fall season. Of course, listeners can be, tuning in at any time of the year, but we're getting ready for fall and Halloween here. And so, Nick, I've got some Halloween fall trivia for you today. You're always so good at the trivia, and I wanted to start today by sharing some of this with you and giving you a chance to see how well you do with 5 Halloween/fall related trivia questions.
You're putting me on the spot. And this is the second quiz of the day. Rick, it's the second quiz of the day. It turns out with the place that they're doing my hip surgery, it's like all through an app. You have to do these courses, like what you do, how you. Anyway, they sent me a quiz today. Not only did I have to take it in one sitting without cheating, 21 questions, they send the answers to the nursing team and the doctor, and then they respond to the ones I got wrong.
Wow. Is this about kind of prep and making sure you're doing what you need to do? Or what? I don't understand. Why would they quiz you?
More post-surgery stuff? Signs of blood clotting.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, most of the stuff I fortunately knew because I actually did the course, but a few of them I totally forgot. I couldn't even remember what kind of bandage I was going to have on afterwards. So that hopefully I'll do better on this quiz than I did on that one. So I'm ready. Let's do this. I'm ready.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
Give it to me.
Okay, but let's get started here with our Halloween quiz. So, Nick, how many pounds of candy corn are produced each year? And I'm going to give you multiple choice on these questions. So I'm going to give you 3 options here. Is it 250,000 pounds? Is it 35 million pounds of candy corn? Or is it 1 billion, but the B, billion pounds of candy corn are produced each year?
It's 2,000 pounds in a ton, right?
Correct.
And the first, what was choice A?
250,000 pounds.
All right, so that's 25,000 tons. I'm going to go B.
35 million pounds?
Yeah.
Nick, that is correct. Ding, 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 ding. I wish I'd have my sound effects machine here, but you are correct. 35 million pounds of candy corn produced each year. Nick, that is 9 billion pieces of candy corn. How about that?
God, I hate candy corn passionately.
I was just going to ask you if you like candy corn, but you hate it, huh?
Hate it. And not only do I hate it, when we were in Gettysburg at this candy store I told you about, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, they had a candy corn flavored soda, which I would never buy or try, but
that sounds good to me. Did the girls like candy corn?
Nope.
Really? Oh, wow.
No.
How about Danielle? Does she like candy corn?
She probably does. She likes all candy. If it's candy, she'll eat it. Okay. I would imagine she does, yeah.
Wow, fascinating. We like candy corn here in the Albright household, so we're part of that 35 million pounds that gets produced and I assume mostly consumed each year. But that's amazing, isn't it?
All the Albrights, all of them. None of them.
Everybody eats it. Everybody eats it. We really like it. Yeah,
I would have guessed Desi was not a candy corn person. But
now she is. Yeah, now she is.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to stick with the theme here, Nick. Number 2. What was candy corn originally called? Originally called when it was first produced? Is it A, sweet corn, B, sweet and 3, or 3, chicken feed?
I'm going to go with C, chicken feed.
Ding, 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 ding. Nick, that is impressive. You're 2 for 2. Chicken feed. Tell me, how did you get that one? I'm shocked. I was shocked by this answer myself.
There's a term in education called chicken feed education, and there's a picture of it that I always kind of felt like that kind of looks like candy corn or corn kernels. So
really,
I just took a gut guess when you gave me that one.
Fascinating. Well, that was impressive. Let's go to number 3. We'll get off the theme of the candy corn for a minute. Number 3, what famous magician died on Halloween? Is it A, Harry Houdini, B, Harry Blackstone Jr., senior, or C, David Copperfield?
I'm going to go with A, and the reason why is because my brother, Michael, when he was in 5th grade, did a report where they had to be a famous person, and he did Harry Houdini, and he did it in front of our fireplace with the red lights on him, and he wore the magic hat and talked about how he died on Halloween night. That was the one part of the report
this
I
one.
remember.
This isn't a guess. This is pure knowledge.
Yeah.
So excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. Ding, ding, ding. Yes, you're absolutely right. Harry Houdini. And you probably know this too, Nick, but David Copperfield's still alive, right? So
he's still living, yes.
Yeah, he's still living.
Not dead. Not dead.
He hasn't had like big specials or anything where he's making the Statue of Liberty disappear lately, though. Has he done anything like that? Maybe I've just missed it.
Isn't it funny how the one we remember is the Statue of Liberty disappearing? Didn't he like walk through the Great Wall of China once too?
Yeah, I think he did. That's
crazy
right.
Stuff. Yeah, but our generation remembers the 80s. It's like, yep, when the Statue of Liberty, what was that, like 86?
I don't know. I remember it distinctly. It was like prime time, right? I mean, everybody was tuning in for that.
Yeah, we'll have to Google that at some point.
Yeah. Good stuff. Hey, you're 3 for 3. You're rocking this. All right. Number 4. When was Halloween first celebrated in the United States? Is it A, the 1780s, B, the 1930s, or C, the 1840s?
Let's see. We know like All Hallows Eve and Samhain was celebrated in England, so that definitely predates the colonies, which, let's see, independence was 1776. What was the first choice?
A is 1780s.
Yeah, so that's like 20 years later. We had a war going on. Like we didn't have time for that nonsense. And then the next two choices were 1840s.
B is actually the 1930s.
1930s.
And then C backs up a little bit to the 1840s.
God, so 1840s is like pre-Civil War, but there's a lot going on. But then the 1930s is the Great Depression. So why would we start doing something expensive during the Great Depression? My gut, I don't know. I don't have a gut. So I'm thinking B, but I'm thinking B, but it could be C too. Oh God, I think I'm going to go the 1930s.
1930s. Answer B is incorrect. Oh, you were right on though with your thinking, Nick. It was C, the 1840s. So you had it narrowed and you kind of had a good rationale for it, but just ended up picking the wrong one there at the end. But that's it's been around a long time, right? That's kind of wild. It's been around since the 1840s. We've been celebrating Halloween. I'm pretty fascinated by that. All right, Nick, I think you'll do better and redeem yourself here on the next one because I remember from our college days you are a fan of Michael Jackson music. And so let's go there. Iconic Halloween song Thriller was directed by what famous director? Is it A, John Landis, B, John Carpenter, or C, Stanley Kubrick?
It's the first one and if you watch the Making of Thriller video, they show how it was inspired by An American Werewolf in London and how the werewolf effects from the video were actually improving upon that particular movie. So Michael Jackson was a big fan of that movie, and they actually show the two of them working together creating the video. So A would be the answer to that one.
Ding, ding, ding. That is absolutely right. And you know your stuff. That was perfect. So good stuff. Hey, Nick, I've got a bonus question. So you only missed 1 out of the 5, but I'm going to give you a chance to make it a perfect score with that bonus question. Okay.
It works for me. Absolutely.
And we're going to stick on Thriller. We're going to stay there for a minute. So in the song Thriller, how were the wolf howls recorded in the songs? How were the wolf sounds recorded in the singular song, sorry. Is it A, they recorded a Great Dane in a barn left by itself overnight? B, they recorded actual wolves in Northern California? Or C, Michael Jackson himself made the wolf howls?
I'm going to eliminate choice A because that would be animal cruelty, and I don't think they would have approved of that. So, they always used to say no animals were harmed in this film.
Yeah.
I feel like you can't leave a dog alone overnight. Northern California, that seems more likely. And then Michael Jackson, though, is pretty amazing. But I never heard that. So I never heard C, and I feel like I would have. So I'm going to go with B.
Sorry, Nick. You were actually, it was Michael Jackson himself. This is fascinating to me because when I read this, I went back and listened to the song, and I'm like, how did he do that? But he's, of course, a master, with what he can do with his voice. But
no question,
it certainly sounds like an actual wolf. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, I mean, just fascinating that he did that himself. That was so cool.
Wow, that's okay. Well, that's awesome. Funny, I never heard that fact before. I'm now going to have to go back and make the girls watch the making of Thriller and the actual Thriller video.
Yeah, and you listen to the wolves, and it's just fascinating and amazing that he did that. Little interesting tidbit, Nick. The recording of a Great Dane left in a barn by itself overnight. They actually tried to do it that way. John Landis tried to get the sounds, but the dog just went to sleep. and didn't make any sounds at all. So Michael Jackson said, "I'll just do it." So that's how they ended up getting the sound. So hey, Nick, you did excellent. Awesome. 4 out of 5. That's an 80%. That is definitely a pass. So very impressive, sir. Well done.
I will take it. I will take it.
What's been going on with you?
I got nothing nowhere near as good as that. I was just gonna celebrate the fact that I got on the scale this morning, a week out from surgery, 238 pounds. I haven't been in the 230s since 2012 was the last time I was in the 230s. So I'm pretty happy with that. So 25 more pounds to go, and I think I'll be satisfied.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It'll be less weight on the new hip. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
But nothing else so exciting. Yeah,
you've got this new hip surgery coming up in about a week, right?
Yeah, Friday of next week. So tomorrow it'll be, I guess that's 7 or 8 days. Kind of like The Ring, which is another great Halloween movie. Very scary. You know where they say, have you seen that one?
I have not. I know about it. I'm a chicken.
Yeah, it will scare you. That one.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You. Haven't made the girls haven't watched that one yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we just we talked about, we took them to see The Exorcist Believer.
I read negative reviews of that. Like it wasn't good.
No, it was not good. In fact, if you go to my brother's podcast, which you can find on YouTube, it's called Geekly, Keith and Mike's Geekly. Mike and I did a review because Mike, me, and the two girls went. And I would say the first 20 minutes of the movie, really cool, set up some good ideas. And then it all pretty much goes downhill from there.
That's unfortunate.
Pretty upsetting.
Yeah, and they had invested a lot of money into that, right? So that's kind of a bust for. Well, is it Universal or
Universal? But here's what's interesting about it. Was it Universal or Paramount? I can't remember which one. Remember? I thought it was Universal. Well, it doesn't matter. So everything you see in the reports are saying they paid $400 million. They paid $400 million for the rights to make any type of Exorcist media. So it's like for now until forever, I think they own the rights to make Exorcist properties. The movie itself only cost $30 million to make.
Oh, so I see.
And it made about that in the first week, and it's dropped off since then, and the reviews are terrible. But they actually aren't losing money on the movie per se. They just have a big price tag on like the entire franchise. So
so they just have to. Just do better moving forward, and they'll end up recouping. So
and they might do it on, like they might release on the network instead of. It has to be, I think it's Universal. I think because they said Peacock might be like the release thing, whatever. But kind of disappointing. And then I love going to see like Halloween horror movies and things like that. So there's not a whole lot left coming out this particular Halloween. So there's Five Nights at Freddy's. Which the kids are all into, and they understand the video game and the premise of that stuff. But nothing else too exciting, really.
Okay.
Yeah. Best horror movie of the year was Let Me Talk to Me. I don't know if we talked about that on the podcast. It came out this summer. It's
I've read some things about it that says it's just amazing, right?
Yeah, so I had to push my brother to go see it, and once he realized it was an A24 production, he was all about it, and it was really, really good. Like they, took some chances. These are two guys who make like YouTube movies. You know what I mean? Like, and they got this chance to make a real movie, and they really, really, really hired some great actors, set some great atmosphere, made up interesting rules for the universe, but not too. They didn't tie themselves in too tightly to it, and they went with a pretty brave ending as well. So definitely the best horror movie of the year by far.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, we've got a blog that has nothing to do with The Exorcist, but in The Exorcist, we needed an old priest and a young priest, and the title of your blog is An Old Man and New Tricks. So that's the worst segue ever in the history of segues, but take it from here, Rick.
All right. Yep. Thank you, Nick, for that. It's An Old Man and New Tricks. So an old man lived in a village. The whole village was tired of him. He was always gloomy. He constantly complained and was always in a bad mood. The longer he lived, the viler he became, and more poisonous were his words. People did their best to avoid him because his misfortune was contagious. He created the feeling of unhappiness in others. But one day, when he turned 80, an incredible thing happened. Instantly, everyone started hearing the rumor, "The old man is happy today. He doesn't complain about anything. He smiles, and even his face is freshened up." The whole village gathered around the man and asked him, "What happened to you?" The old man replied, "Nothing special. 80 years I've been chasing happiness, and it was useless. And then I decided to live without happiness and just enjoy life. That's why I'm happy now." I wonder if you know anyone like the old man in this story, gloomy and constantly complaining. If you work, the answer is probably yes. One of the most dangerous things about a person like this is mentioned in the story. Did you catch it? The attitude was contagious. Who are you hanging around, and what attitude are you catching from them? What kind of attitude are those in your circle of influence catching from you? There's yet another important truth woven into this short story. The old man changed. Anyone can change, and no one has to wait until they're 80 years old to do so. While a person's personality and circumstances do affect how they view the world, everyone has the capacity to choose how to focus their perceptions. I challenge myself this week to catch myself focusing on negatives, and when I do, to list 5 positive things in my head. I invite you all to join me in this endeavor this week, and let's see if it doesn't impact our level of energy and our ability to inspire those around us.
Excellent story. Excellent metaphor for life. And I love the practical advice in there at the end, Rick, where when you focus on the negative thoughts, that you have to list 5 positive things in your head, because that is actually scientifically proven that our brains are wired for negative. I mean, back in the day when we were, we had to be negative because death was around every corner. In order to change the neural pathways in your brain, and remyelinate some of those pathways, you have to actually like 5 times as many positive thoughts as negative thoughts, which is why, you see gratitude journals and things like that, being so popular, over the past several years and things like that. My question for you in regards to the blog this week are what inspired you to pick this particular story to illustrate the message, particularly the use of the fact that this man was 80 years old when he came to this discovery or realization?
Nick, I end up teaching a lot about fixed mindset, growth mindset, right? And that's probably in this story, right? The idea that this old man had a fixed mindset about the way he viewed the world. And there's truth that we have set ways of thinking. And there's also a truth in the idea that the older we get, the more difficult it is to create new neural pathways to change. But it's not impossible. It's just more difficult than it is when we're 8 years old, right? So very easy. Our we call it neuroplasticity, right? Our brains are very, very elastic and malleable when we're younger, and it gets more hard and concrete as we get older, but it's not concrete. It isn't. There's still neuroplasticity there. We just have to intentionally work about it and not just revert to our default mode, because sometimes that's just what we do as we age, is we revert to default. And so it is possible, but the first kind of step in that is being attentive to it, right? Recognizing, hey, there's a problem here. I want to do something about it. I want to make a change. And then the other key piece to this, Nick, is the challenge you've already mentioned that I'm going to work on this week is anytime I have that thought, I'm going to try to think of 5 positive things. I think we've talked about this in past podcasts. We've talked about the importance of not only having kind of smart goals, but the importance of having implementation intention, right? Specifically what I'm going to do when this happens, right? So otherwise it sounds just like this. I'm going to try to be more positive this week. Okay, well, I tried, or did I try? I think I tried, right? But this is beyond, this is a very specific action I'm going to do when I'm thinking negatively. And so again, in this book, Atomic Habits, which is fantastic, this is an implementation intention. This is something very specific I'm to do to target a greater goal of thinking more positively, but I have a very specific way to get there. So yeah, that's a little bit of my thinking about this. And I guess the other piece to this, Nick, is just the idea that, gosh, this is so common. And I understand why. Our fields, counseling and education, it's hard, it's challenging, it's stressful. We don't get paid a lot. There's lots of reasons to be a little bit disgruntled and unhappy, right? There's plenty of those.
Sure.
But being disgruntled and unhappy doesn't usually change any of those things, right? It probably just makes it worse for the person who is feeling and acting that way, and kind of for everybody else too. So, there's much more positive and much more benefits to thinking positively and trying to enjoy the ride, even though it's challenging.
Yeah, there's a saying in the principalship. I'm sure I've said it 100 times on the podcast. It's a Todd Whitakerism, which is, if the principal sneezes, the whole staff catches a cold. Leadership is contagious in the regards of, if you're always negative, then it's going to be harder for the people under you to see that there's positives as well. In one of our earlier episodes, you talked a lot about a counseling philosophy where, rather than pointing things out when you do sessions and things like that, you try to ask questions to bring people around to that way of thinking. So I'm sure some of our listeners would hear this story and say, well, more often than the story of where the person just realizes this and changes, more often than not, I see myself looking at a person who is negative all the time, and I want to help them see that or help them bring about a change, but I don't know how to do that. So from your counseling expertise and perspective, what would your advice be for someone who's looking to help maybe a family member or a good friend look at things differently and make them maybe realize that they are being negative and there's other ways to look at it?
Yeah, I think one would be, and I'm going to use kind of counselor as terminology, so you forgive me for that, but one would be using an I statement. So saying something like, I'm not feeling real good today, but I'm going to try to be positive about it, right? Using an I statement to express the kind of perspective that you would like the other person to express, because we do model off of each other. It's natural, right? So one would just be to kind of express your own kind of perspectives that are more positive, and hope that a little bit of that rubs off over time. Even if the person is older than you, I think that's possible, because I don't think it's necessarily an older person has to model for a younger person. I think we all model off of each other, right? Regardless of age. And I think the other thing I would say is, and I mentioned this kind of little verbal stem before on the program, but my favorite verbal stem to use with people is, I wonder, and then fill in the blank. I wonder what it would be like if you thought about that differently. I wonder what it would be like if you thought about a few things today that were good and happy. So you're not forcing kind of a perspective. You're just wondering out loud with somebody and allowing them to consider. And of course, they can reject it if they want to. But, I think most people won't. I think most people will go along, play along, because they're not feeling kind of imposed upon, because they're just, instead of being opposed upon, they're being invited to consider something different. And I think most of us are more apt or more willing to consider thinking some way different than again, somebody demanding that we do so.
Well, I think that's excellent advice all around. It's a great story. And there are some ties to your blog, to the assets we're going to be moving on to today as well. Do you want to introduce our next two assets? And we really are pushing to the end of the 40 developmental assets here, which is hard to believe.
Yeah, we really are, Nick. So we're all the way up to 35 and 36. And just to remind everybody who's maybe tuning in for the first or second time, that we've been working our way through the 40 developmental assets from the Search Institute, who have really kind of done basically a meta-analysis over 50 years of research, not looking about what goes wrong. There's plenty of folks to look at kind of negatives and negative consequences, negative behaviors, but their focus and emphasis has been looking at what goes right. What is it that helps people overcome difficult circumstances? And they've identified through that meta-analysis of hundreds of studies, 40 basic kind of building blocks internal and external support systems, or skills or gifts or talents or strategies that help people be successful despite difficult circumstances. And we know that research tells us that the more of these 40 that people have, the more they end up having success, and the more they end up being resilient against negative behaviors or not constructive behaviors, right? Dysfunctional behaviors. So we're up to 35 and 36, and 35 is resistance skills. And these are specifically, all of these are designed for an adolescent. So that's really what we've been focusing on. So resistance skills for adolescents. And the definition of this one is a young person can resist negative peer pressure and dangerous situations. And then number 36, we'll get a chance to talk about today as well. And this is peaceful conflict resolution. The young person seeks to resolve conflict non-violently.
Number 35, it brings a lot of conflict, cognitive dissonance to my brain, because the most important part of my teaching career and my most beloved part of my teaching career was working with students with emotional support needs, students with an emotional disturbance. And one of the things that they struggle the most with is being able to resist negative peer pressure in dangerous situations. And one of the hardest things to do, I have found, whether it's high school, whether it's middle school, even elementary school, to be honest, across all three of those levels, it's for teachers and administrators to be able to understand that an emotional disturbance is really a disability. It's very easy, and we've talked about this before lots of times, that, when you see someone wearing a cast on their leg and walking around with crutches, if you have the chance to hold a door for them, you're going to hold the door, or ask them if they need help up the steps, or to realize that they're not going to be able to run a mile in gym class that day. However, when you have disabilities that are unseen, many times it's difficult, especially when the behaviors that are being illustrated are not happy behaviors, they're not respectful behaviors, and they tend to be lots of times oppositionally defiant behaviors and more. It's so difficult because you look at, we look at it from a restorative lens and also from a skill building lens, where I can watch a student go through 3 or 4 years of middle school, however long the building is, and I see where they came in, and I see what skills they had and what skills they didn't, and you can measure that growth over the course of time. But when that kid's just walking through a hallway and encounters a teacher that they don't know and tells that teacher to F off, to that teacher, that's a completely unacceptable behavior, warranting the strictest of discipline and consequences. And, a lot of that feeling from the teacher is warranted. They just don't know. And then even when they do know, a lot of times, again, it's because you can't see it. You can't see, what was that childhood trauma that was involved that led to this? What are the potential issues within the brain that are causing the inability to, follow social norms and read rooms, for lack of a better term. Yeah. So we spend so much time on number 35, and I look back now and I wonder, while it's important to spend time developing those skills from the whole lens of the 40 assets now, and having spent, the better part of the past year really looking at them, it makes me wonder if I would have been better served spending more time focusing on other skills that would have been more easily obtained for those students. Almost taking that checklist and crossing out the ones that they can never achieve. A lot of them will never have the family support, the community support, things like that. But being able to hit on the ones we know we can develop in a time frame. Yeah. And I'm not saying abandon number 35 at all. However, realizing that might be the most difficult and it will take the longest, maybe putting the focus in other places as well, like not putting all the eggs in one basket. So, I just really, that was my thoughts and what I had been, kind of wrestling in my head with for number 35, but very interested in your opinion from the counseling perspective, and also just the parenting and life perspective too, just overall, like how that speaks to you and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nick. What I'm thinking about as you're talking is I'm thinking, one of the common reactions that counselors have when they meet with a kid for the first time is, and they hear the kid's story, right? From the kid themselves or from the family or from whoever made the referral. They get kind of all the details of the whole story. A common reaction and a perfectly reasonable reaction is, whoa. I don't even know where to start because that's overwhelming. I probably don't say that, but that's, internally, that's what the reaction is. And because, man, this kiddo's up against a lot of adversity, right? A lot of difficult at-risk factors that are present in this situation. I don't even know where to start. How do I even help this kiddo, right? They need something else, right? They need like a super therapist or a different placement. That's a common reaction. So I'm thinking as you're kind of sharing your thoughts there, I'm thinking, what I always encourage counselors to do is to understand that that's a reasonable reaction, but also to realize that you don't have to fix everything. Find some things that you can help make a difference, some small things that can help move the needle, and work on those things, right? Because a little bit of change, or a little bit of a progress in one area will often kind of have this blossoming effect in other areas. Right. So just pick something that you think you can have a positive impact on that fits kind of in your role and in your responsibilities. You basically stay in your lane and try to make a difference in a few areas, whether that's academic support or whether that's support helping a kiddo think about what they're going to do when they graduate high school, or maybe that's support helping kiddo learn some social emotional skills. Pick something that's in your lane that you can help a kiddo develop some skills or abilities or support systems, right? That'll fit and work on those things. Don't try to change everything because you're just going to frustrate yourself. You can't. Nobody can. As a community that maybe we can do that better, but as an individual, no. You can kind of select a few things and then work on those. And that's one of the beautiful things about these 40 developmental assets is I'm not going to do all 40. No, don't. No. You've got a school and a family and a community. You've got lots of people, right, who need to be pitching in and providing different kind of support systems. But you can pick one or two, think, gosh, that could really, that's something in my lane and it's something I can help kind of nudge and enhance for this kiddo, giving them a better shot down the road. So I really appreciate kind of your thoughts on that. That was kind of what I was thinking as you said it. I think that in the counseling realm, this is one of those, this number 35, resisting negative peer pressure, making good decisions. I think this is one that counselors can have an impact on. I think this is something that we can go after specifically. And the piece that comes to mind for me, or the strategy that comes to mind for me, is something that we call assertiveness training, helping a kiddo to stand up for themselves in an assertive way. Right. There's a bunch of great tools on 2 freebie websites that I would encourage people to check out. My counselors out there listening in, positivepsychology.com. It's got some great resources for assertiveness training, and therapistaid.com. I know I've referred to that one before on the program. Those are 2 great kind of websites where you can secure some great resources specifically for assertiveness training and also for conflict resolution, which is the next one we're going to tackle here in a minute. But I wanted to point out just a few other things before we move on to conflict resolution, Nick. There's 3 basic kind of responses, 3 basic kind of ways to respond when faced with peer pressure, right? One is, or when triggered in some way. And one is to be assertive. That's the way we want kids to be. The other is to be passive, right? And that's kind of why we want kids to be able to stand up for themselves and not just passively accept and go along to get along. And the third one, though, that's very similar to assertive is aggressive. That kiddos act in aggressive, not just kiddos, but adults as well. So somebody is triggered to a difficult situation, environment, some demands in the environment, and they respond in either assertive, passive, or aggressive ways. And I think the key is helping to differentiate between the 3, and then think through how you're responding and make sure that it's assertive and not passive and not aggressive. And some of that is just understanding what the differences are. And I think another piece of that is being able to role play that in advance. Gosh, what a great capacity. If I've role played it in advance, I'm prepared for that situation. I've actually, practiced it. I practiced role playing that situation, and I'm much more prepared to do it. One of the common complaints in counseling, and one of the common frustrations is, I'm talking with a kiddo and they can tell me what they should do when they're under peer pressure or when they're called a bad name, right? Or somebody posts something nasty about them online. They know how they should respond, what they should do, but then they get to the actual situation and they respond much differently, right? And that's common. They do great with me in session, but once they leave back to the school, back to the classroom, back to the family, right? What happened? They knew what to do, but then they actually didn't do it. And so, well, that's just common. And one of the things you can do is role play to kind of help bridge the gulf. Another thing that we commonly recommend, and Nick, you were getting at this a little bit, is journaling. Journaling some of those situations. We do anger journals a lot, right? We do, just to kind of help a kiddos write down what happened, what they were thinking, feeling, and behaving in the midst of that, and then bringing that journal and talking about it with the counselor, therapist, or a teacher, right, who can help kind of guide them on that. Just, I think that mindfulness that's required by that journaling really kind of helps kids intentionally kind of act in ways that are more productive than others. But let me get back to this and share something, Nick, that I think about a lot is the difference between, there's this huge difference between being passive and being assertive or aggressive. This really big difference, right? But I think there's not so much a difference between being assertive and being aggressive, because both assertive and aggressive, what are we trying to do? I think what we're trying to do is convey perspectives, information, boundaries, or perspectives with clarity, confidence, and seriousness. Both assertiveness and aggressiveness, when we're responding to a challenging situation, I'll say it again, we're conveying our perspectives, information, boundaries, or perspectives with clarity, confidence, and seriousness. The only thing different between assertiveness and aggressiveness is aggression adds anger, physical or emotional intimidation, right? Or verbal intimidation. It just adds that little piece. So they look almost exactly the same. And here's the thing that bothers me more than anything, Nick, is I think our society doesn't do a great job. Even our leaders sometimes don't do a great job of modeling assertiveness. What they're actually doing is modeling aggressiveness. And we don't talk about politics on the show, but if you look at any politician or you look at some debates, we're about ready to head into voting season. It breaks my heart to watch those. I try not to, because I think what gets modeled more than anything is aggressiveness, not assertiveness. We need our politicians to be assertive, to stand up for what they believe in, to convey their thoughts, right, and the reasons for their thoughts in a very clear and serious manner. But too often, I think they end up being aggressive by being angry, right, or calling other people names, for goodness sakes, right? We do all kinds of other things. And I think, unfortunately, our kids are watching some of that too, kind of whether it's politicians or whether it's kind of school staff, right, or counselors or parents, maybe, who are acting in aggressive ways when they're under stress. And what we really want to teach kids to be assertive and set the anger aside, right, and dive fully into the idea of being serious, and speaking clearly and speaking loudly with confidence. We want to keep those pieces, but when we include the anger, it ends up being problematic. And I know one more piece, and then I'll turn it over to you, Nick. But the other problem with this whole thing is sometimes being aggressive works. Right? We see people get what they want or get their points made when they're aggressive. And so it gets reinforced. That happens to politicians. It happens to kids too. When they act in aggressive ways, they get what they want, or they get out of trouble, or whatever it might be. It ends up working. But in the long run, kind of those of us with wisdom and experience, we know that, but that's not going to be productive for you down the line. But it's hard to tell a kid that when, this is what they're doing. That's how they're responding, and it's working. It's getting them what they want. We talked about this early in the program when we talked about lying, dishonesty. Right, because the value of honesty. And we talked about, that's one of the really hard things about this is sometimes people get away with dishonesty and it works. It works. We just know that when it's chronic dishonesty, it ends up causing problems too. But it's hard for a kiddo, especially kind of a immediate gratification mindset, brains, to understand that kind of in the long run, I want to be looked at as a person with integrity and who's assertive and not aggressive, because in the long run, that's going to benefit me more specifically around good relationships. So, I've talked too much, Nick. Well, any other thoughts about this one, or do you want to go to conflict resolution?
No, I couldn't add anything better. I would just reinforce, I think, the importance of assertiveness training for, the general population. It's something that I don't think we spend enough time on with students. And while I know that with students who definitely have a demonstrated need in that area, that our counselors do teaching about that, and they also run groups where that's included. Yeah. However, I think that it's a healthy teaching lesson for all students, because if everyone kind of has that common framework, similar to when we're talking about I statements, then you're using a common language, and it makes it easier to relate to other people, especially, the more diverse we are, because different people, different cultures, different everything views things in different ways and sometimes handles things in different ways. So, finding that common ground is important. I think number 35, obviously, as we move on to that one, it goes without saying to a large degree, but I think, I'm sorry, number 36, my bad. When we talk about peaceful conflict resolution, there's definitely, there's always been you always dread the phone call where, two students got in a fight and the parent or the guardian says to you, well, I told my student they should always, if someone pushes them, they should push back. Yeah. It's really difficult, one, to argue that mentality, because there are times when you have to fight back in order to protect yourself or to protect someone else. Mm-hmm. And schools are looked at as always, I can't tell you how many times I've heard in any district I've worked in, well, you have a zero tolerance policy, and that's ridiculous. Everyone, no, we don't. I've never worked in a district that has a zero tolerance policy. Yeah. It's just a lot of times, if there is a way to resolve the conflict nonviolently and you choose not to do it, then you're going to be held responsible too for the part that you're responsible for. Mm-hmm. But the thing I wanted to touch on was one of the programs I really enjoy, and our district uses it, is the Second Step program.
Oh yeah.
And it's a series of lessons, and there's different ways to implement it. When you get to the middle level, obviously you're going to be taking curricular time if you ask a core subject or a non-core subject to do these lessons. We use some of our advisory time, and we actually use a play posit scenario to do that, so we can track all students and kind of audio record those lessons so students can work independently through it, because they're pretty easy to access in terms of. But one of the things I found particularly good about Second Step, and I've tended to focus obviously on the middle level, so grades 6, 7, and 8, is their units and their lessons on conflict resolution. What I like about them are that they don't overload it. They give you a few key bullet points, and they give you an example. Then they give you another example without the solution and ask you how you would solve it. And then they offer some possible solutions to that. And then they give you a way to generalize it to your life with some questions and conversation and things like that. So they really tie those skills together nicely and offering ways to do that. Now, is that, again, are we hitting the audience that really needs those lessons directly? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Mm-hmm. But I think that everyone can find value in learning how to peacefully resolve things. So, and it sounds like a conflict of interest to be like, well, we need to teach people how to be assertive, but then we need to teach them to resolve conflicts nonviolently. Assertive is preferred to exploding and resorting
that's
to
the aggressiveness,
violence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, I try to tell kids all the time, and it's one of the few times I actually see the light bulb go off for some kids, is when a student says, well, I just got so upset and I pushed them. So totally understand. Now look at the video here. When that kid falls into that locker, look how close their head comes to hitting that locker. That kid could have gotten a concussion had that happened. And then they're in the hospital, and then you have a whole other slew of problems, that come across for you, which you didn't think you were going to have because you never thought it would escalate to that point. And that's just one of many, examples, putting kindness to the side completely. So, that was really I would just emphasize, and there's other programs similar to Second Step that do the same things. I think it's program agnostic, but I think you have to teach it. Otherwise, you're not going to have kids who go home and spend, 3 hours Googling and looking for conflict resolution strategies, when they could be on TikTok watching dogs do tricks and things like that. So,
yeah. Yeah, I agree. Those are curriculums and those lessons to teach good conflict resolution are important, kind of defining and helping kids think through examples of collaboration and compromise and the unique strategies there between the difference between those two, I think is important. I think just as important as that is that the kids see these things modeled, right? That they see the adults in their life, particularly who use conflict resolution strategies, who use compromise and collaboration. And I think sometimes, where do they see that? Because I don't know that I see that very often. In fact, sometimes I think, and I'm not throwing adults under the bus here. I think sometimes what adults do is they think we're not getting along. We're going to shield kids from this and pretend that, everything's good, right? Yep. Which is understandable that we do that. But man, what an opportunity if we've got a disagreement to kind of in the midst of that disagreement or afterwards to say to kids, all right, so here was the situation, right? I don't know. We picked a Saturday for the field trip, but the other teachers wanted a different Saturday, and we were stuck because some people had plans this day and some people had plans that day. So we got together kind of after school one day and we talked it out, and we decided to pick a completely different day to go on the field trip. Just talking that out and using the terminology, right, that we compromised. We collaborated to compromise, to come up with a solution where we both got a little bit what we wanted, to be able to kind of identify moments of real life and then share that with kids. I think, man, what a unique opportunity that teachers are in and that parents are in to do that. Now, it's not appropriate in every case to kind of, share all the nitty gritty details with kids of the mess of what's happening. But to be aware in the midst of a disagreement to think to yourself, is this something that we can use, right? Is there opportunity here to teach? Mm-hmm. Right? That's real. That's not just out of a book or off a worksheet, but this is real life. This is a challenge where it has to do with them, right? This is something that impacts them right here, right now, or this past week or whatever it was, right? I think there's wonderful opportunities. And I'm reminded as I say that, Nick, that my counselors sometimes get frustrated. My counselors in training sometimes get frustrated because they'll be running a small group on social skills and they'll get frustrated because the kids keep interrupting each other.
Yep.
And I'll say, no, it's great. It's great because the challenge that had them in the small group in the first place is present. It's happening right there, right now. You don't have to talk about something that happened in class last week or something happens at home. It's right in front of you. It's a great time to say, time out, everybody. Let's talk about what's happening, what we're thinking and what we're feeling and how we can make it better. Right? What changes we can make to help this group run more smoothly. It can be a great thing when problems occur if you look at them, kind of like the old man in our story, right? When you can look at them with a different perspective. What opportunity is in here to teach or to model something productive? And I think sometimes we miss that because we're not always thinking that way. We're just trying to fix something. And we're not always thinking about, well, how do I fix something and then use it as a teaching moment? Which if we are thinking that way, that probably pulls our emotions out of it a little bit anyway, which probably makes it a little bit easier to look at solutions. Reminds us of the importance of collaboration and compromise.
Yeah, all completely salient points. And it doesn't always have to be, it's not always conflict resolution. Sometimes it's, you said it a few times. The field trip example was the perfect example. So we have a mission to accomplish, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not that necessarily everyone's disagreeing and there's conflict. It could just be that there's legitimately, I can't do this Saturday for this reason. And then compromise obviously becomes easier. But when you're able to, like you said, use that language and have common ground conversation, and you can illustrate that thinking, you can actually understand the why that's behind it. And a lot of times that becomes looking at other people's perspectives. I think a great example of that, which I think a great example of the non-conflict example is some of our early planning for our trip out west next year, right? So it's like, okay, well, we've got these options where we can do northern route or southern route. And if we do southern route, then we don't get to do, I think, Wisconsin Dells. Yeah. And you chimed in and you said right away, you were like, hey, I'm really looking forward to Wisconsin Dells. That's an important part of the trip to me. right? There's no conflict. We're all just sharing our ideas. But now the rest of the group that is trying to make decisions understands that that is something particularly important to a member of the group. So we use our ability to empathize, our ability to understand, and then look for, okay, so to make that happen, we do it this way. And then everyone is excited about maybe a part of the trip that one person might not have been as excited about, but they're like, well, that's cool though, because that's what Rick really wants to do. And I get to do my thing at Crazy Horse later or whatever it is. I just think it enhances an experience more than it normally would be if everyone just always went along with, one person's idea, basically.
Yeah, that would be the passive one, right? We need to advocate for ourselves. We need to teach kids to advocate for themselves, because if they're not, nobody else might be jumping in to do it, right? We just have to help them to find ways to do that are effective, and not just for one instance, but are effective over the course of a lifetime, right? Strategies that they can use to be effective. And for me, it's not only going to Wisconsin Dells, but it's also going to a Wisconsin cheese store.
Correct. Yes.
I'm very excited about the Wisconsin cheese store.
We've got the Noah's Ark Water Park. We've got the Witch's Gulch or Witch's.
Witch's Gulch. Yeah.
Witch's
That
Gulch.
looks awesome. Yeah.
And then a cheese store, obviously, which, all those things are clearly going to be happening, which is exciting.
And any of our listeners from Wisconsin, let us know if there's some other kind of hidden gems that maybe we're not aware of, because we're planning that trip now. So.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, and we do have listeners in Wisconsin, I believe.
Yeah, we do.
And we have listeners in Belgium now, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
I would like some chocolate from Belgium. I think that would be nice. Speaking of chocolate.
I'm
going to make yet another terrible segue into our Every Rose Has Its Thorn segment this week, where you came up with this idea. And I'm so excited about it.
And we teased this one last week on the podcast for those who chimed in last week.
We did tease it last week. Yeah. So Rick and I have talked quite a bit on the podcast about college and career readiness, vocation, things to do post-secondary based. And I don't know that we've talked extensively about, how to choose a college or how to help your child choose a college. In fact, maybe we haven't talked about that at all, and we certainly can. But today, in our Every Rose Has Its Thorn segment, where we discuss breakfast cereals, I'm going to go slightly off the giving roses and thorns, although I will, and present to you the official collegiate rankings. There's 3 types of colleges or universities. There's a tier 1 college. That's the ultimate. That's the absolute best. There's a tier 2 college, which is average to above average. And then there's your tier 3 colleges, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them, but they're tier 3 for a reason. Now, you might think that decision is going to be made based on the academic prowess, of employment opportunities obtained afterwards, activities, football teams, athletic, the arts. No, none of that plays into the rankings. There is one factor and characteristic that plays into a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 college, and that is the availability of breakfast cereal in the dining commons. That's it. It's that simple. That simple. And you think, oh, well, you're just going to give some vague, definitions. No. I'm going to lay specifics on you. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. You're either a tier 1, a tier 2, or a tier 3. There is no compromise here. So, Rick, obviously we're going to make them wait for that. That's going to be, they're going to hang on. So why don't we start with our own personal roses and thorns for breakfast cereal, and then we'll go into the most important thing in the history of our podcast.
Yeah, the climax of this segment. So, good. So, let me start. I'm going to go with my roses first this week. So, my first, and I maybe teased this last week, my number 1 rose is peanut butter Cap'n Crunch. I love peanut butter Cap'n Crunch. There's like some kind of a cereal varnish that they put on that thing that you can put milk in there and leave it in there for like 10 minutes and it does not get soggy. It stays crunchy and it doesn't get soggy and soak in the milk, but it kind of absorbs some of the milk. So you get like a explosion of milk, of like sugar milk when you crunch it. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I love peanut butter Cap'n Crunch. And as much as I like Reese's, the Reese's Puffs are not, they just don't They don't compare. They don't compare to peanut butter Captain Crunch. That's my number one rose. I'll give you a runner up though. And you mentioned chocolate in the segue, Nick. How about some Cocoa Krispies? Some Cocoa Krispies that are delicious. You have to eat them a little more quickly than you do the peanut butter Captain Crunch because they will sog on you. But if you get those consumed in a good amount of time, you get a double treat because you not only get the delicious Cocoa Krispies, but then you get to drink the chocolate milk. Oh, man. Just makes me happy thinking about that.
There's nothing I can add to that. That's just the perfect.
Such good stuff.
It's the perfect. Yeah. Bella would disagree with you slightly. Cocoa.
Really?
Reese's Puffs are her favorite cereal.
Really? Has she had the peanut butter Captain Crunch to compare?
I don't think she has. Which we will have to make her try that. But
yeah, I'm going to bring some along on the trip next. Actually, I'll bring some along to Liberty.
Ooh, yeah, great idea.
I will get some to bring some along so she can try it and compare and contrast. Well, maybe we'll get both. Maybe I'll get both so she has to kind of taste them both. Ooh,
I'm pretty sure we'll have
blind taste test. Oh, you'll have you'll have some Reese's?
She'll have the Reese's Puffs, but I don't know that you can do a blind taste test because Captain Crunch is so crunchy and the Reese's Puffs kind of like are soft and like,
I think they're darker too. I think they're darker.
I think they are. Yeah, they've got that.
Unless we actually
powder.
made her blind. I mean, we'll actually give her a blindfold or something. I don't know. There's a way to do it. She's definitely going to have to test them both. Yeah.
So what are the thorns, Rick?
All right, I've got two thorns. Number one thorn is Cheerios. Sorry, my Cheerios fans everywhere. I've not ever been a fan of Cheerios. They're just bland to me. I have all different kinds of Cheerios, and I just don't really care for them. I'm not a Cheerios fan. And the number two is my thorn here, Nick, is a cereal that I loved and I can no longer get it. So it's harkening back to, remember we talked about like some of the candy bars that they no longer make, right? Like Powerhouse and PB Crunch and things like that. Well, they no longer make Nut and Honey. I loved Nut and Honey. Yeah, you can't get it anymore. And remember one of the best things about Nut and Honey, speaking of the 80s, Nick, is they had the ads where you'd have like this private sitting, like, you know, eating a cereal, and a sergeant walks in with a mustache and said, "What are you eating, private?" And then the private looks up and says, "Nut and Honey." And the sergeant gets all mad. I mean, they had a lot of different variations of that little catch, but love the ads and I love the cereal, and I don't know why it got discontinued. So that's a thorn for me because I can no longer get it, and I no longer get to watch the funny ads.
That's a real thorn. So yeah, I would say real quick, my roses is that breakfast cereal can be a meal, any meal of the day. It can be a breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and snack. So always room for breakfast cereal. Yep. A secondary rose would be any chocolate cereal that makes the milk chocolate milk that you get to drink at the end. Yeah. Just like you said. Yeah. And I'm only going to go one thorn, and I actually thought you were going to mention this, and this is even with breakfast cereals I like. So there are ones that qualify on my like it list, but I can't really eat it for this reason. And honeycombs is a good example. Any cereal that makes the top gum behind your front teeth, you know, like your top teeth, raw and tears the skin up in your mouth. You know what I mean? Okay. Like honeycombs are a good example. Captain Crunch does do that sometimes, unfortunately. So those are the cereals that really really mess up the roof of your mouth or your tongue or anything like that. That's a pet peeve there.
Interesting. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Reasonable. Yeah. Reasonable thorns. Mm-hmm.
Well, Rick, it's time.
All right. Let's do it.
The ranking. So you will know whatever college you pick to go to. You people out there, you make your decisions, do what you want. But when you visit, go to the dining commons and look at the availability of the breakfast cereals. And you will then know if your school is a tier 1, a tier 2, a tier 3. I'm going to tell you up front. Rick and I went to Penn State. Penn State is a tier 1 school. It's a tier 1 school. Undoubtedly. Now we're going to start with tier 1, the bread and butter, the gold standard. This is mandatory. There's no room for argument. I will make no exceptions. You can either agree or buzz off. Here we go. A tier 1 school will always have Golden Grams. Always. You are not a tier 1 school unless you have Golden Grams. You are not a tier 1 school unless you have Lucky Charms.
Good point.
You must have Golden Grams. You must have Lucky Charms. Now, I will allow one of those two, either Golden Grams or Lucky Charms, I will allow them to be substituted by Honeycomb. But if it's not Honeycomb, you can't make a substitution. It's Golden Grams or Lucky Charms. Now, a Tier 1 school, in addition to those two, must also have name brand Kellogg's Raisin Bran. Name brand. Not cheap knockoff generic. Okay,
no great value here. They got to have Kellogg's.
Yep, got to be Kellogg's. Or Post. Post is acceptable as well. Post or Post or Kellogg's. Next, not Cheerios. You have to have one step up flavor-wise. So minimally, a Tier 1 college must have Honey Nut Cheerios. All right. Now, you could have
or
Cheerios
frosted,
and
right? Or frosted Cheerios.
Vanilla, whatever it's called. Yeah, any flavor that is above base level Cheerios. Okay. Yeah. So, and now to be clear, you can still maintain Tier 1 status if you have Honey Nut Cheerios and regular Cheerios too. That's fine, but you have to have the step up. Okay. All right. Next, you have to have some type of chocolate-based cereal.
I was hoping you were going to add that. Yeah.
And it has to be a name brand. And your choices, I'm just going to give you a couple of the examples that fall into the Tier 1 list. Cocoa Krispies, which you mentioned.
Yes.
Cookie Crisp.
Oof.
Yeah. Or Cocoa Puffs.
Okay.
So those are just 3 examples. And the final cereal on the list to be a Tier 1 school, and this is where a lot of schools drop the ball. And it's a shame because the schools that can manage the Golden Grams and the Lucky Charms and then fall short here, it's Apple Jacks, right? Apple Jacks.
Apple Jacks, okay.
All right, Golden Grams, Lucky Charms, name brand, Raisin Bran, Honey Nut Cheerios, or a different, upped flavor of Cheerios, a chocolate name brand cereal, and Apple Jacks. That's your Tier 1s. All right.
There's no substitution for Apple Jacks. It's got to be Apple Jacks.
It's got to be Apple Jacks. Yeah.
Wow.
And you obviously, knockoff Apple Jacks because real Apple Jacks have the tiny flakes of red that you can see in the loops. Knockoff Apple Jacks don't have it. That's how you can tell. All right. And if you need to ask, you ask. You go into the kitchen and you look at the boxes. Okay. That's
Nick, I'm concerned about some collegiate personnel kind of listening into the podcast and now being worried that they might be at risk of losing federal funding because they're not really a Tier 1.
They would lose my respect. I don't know if they're going to lose any funding.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, you never know though, because
it's true. I'm not in power. If I were, this would become. Yeah, it's fully federally funded. Everyone would be a Tier 1 college.
Yeah.
That brings us to number 2. Tier 2. All right. Tier 2 minimally must have name brand Raisin Bran, Cheerios, and preferably a level up from Cheerios, but it's not mandatory.
Okay.
Frosted Flakes. And to be considered Tier 2, I will accept generic Frosted Flakes. Okay. A Tier 2 school still must have a chocolate-based name brand cereal. So you still have to have chocolate-based name brand. And while you don't have to have Apple Jacks, you do have to have Fruit Loops.
Oh, I wondered if that would be a substitute. Okay,
name brand. So Tier 2, name brand Raisin Bran, Cheerios with the upgrade, Frosted Flakes, generic acceptable, name brand chocolate, Fruit Loops.
Or now, Apple Jacks, right? You could substitute like Apple Jacks because that's Tier 1.
Correct, yeah.
I'm just trying to keep it straight on my chart. Okay, gotcha.
No, you definitely can. So, for example, if they didn't have Fruit Loops but had Apple Jacks, that is okay. However, if they didn't have a chocolate-based and they had Fruit Loops and Apple Jacks, that does not qualify. They have to have that chocolate-based one in there.
This is complex. Okay, I got you, though. I think I'm following.
Okay, and then finally, Tier 1. Tier 1.
Tier 3.
Oh, my God. Sorry. Yes, Tier 3. Tier 3. This is your Tier 3. Bran Flakes, generic Bran Flakes.
Yeah.
Cheerios or generic Cheerios. And any type of generic Frosted Flakes.
Okay.
That's your Tier 3.
Nick, I'm curious. Do universities, colleges, do they have to have a selection of different milk type products? Does that play anywhere into this, or is that completely optional?
They see. The milk is so important, yet it doesn't matter for the tiers of the cereal.
Okay,
it's its own category. If you remember our Penn State days, Rick, the heavy iron, you have to lift it, and you'd get the chocolate milk, the full milk, the skim milk. There were at least 3 choices there.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there should always be 3 choices. I believe you always had chocolate milk on your plate, didn't you? When there always a chocolate milk, or pretty.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
However, it's not. I can't make that a requirement of my tiers.
There's a lot more options now for milk too, right? There's almond milk, there's silk, there's just all kinds of different oat milk. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Lots of different options. So that's a different ranking though.
A whole different ranking. Yeah. I don't want to touch the milk. It's too complicated for me. I want to stick to my areas of expertise, which is breakfast cereals.
Yeah.
Now, as you can relate, Rick, when you look at tier 1, look at our Penn State experience, and that should tell us everything we need to know, right?
Yeah, fantastic selection. Yeah, I haven't been back there in a long time to know if they're still at tier 1 and things are still strong, or if they've maybe slipped over the years. I haven't been back to find out. In fact, I haven't asked Kaylee about Liberty, but she probably doesn't get up for breakfast because she's not a breakfast eater. But I need to tell her to get over there and take a look.
Yeah, we should have her get that information for us so we can at least have an example for people. You know what I mean? Yeah. Hey, Liberty, here's what they have. Here's what tier they fit into.
We really
or maybe
should.
We'll just go to the Commons when we're there.
We could for breakfast one day.
Yeah, we could pass for
teachers, retired
teachers. Yeah, right. Old senior citizens, pretty much. Yeah, I guess not students. I occasionally will still have a dream where all of us are like standing in a really long line to get into the dining commons for dinner. I don't know why, but every once in a while, I actually it's a dream I have sometimes. And we're always late. You know what I mean? We're always waiting in a long line.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Oh man, that's good stuff, Nick. That should be a scholarly article that you write up and submit to a journal, because that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
We might have to turn that into a blog post at some point, but we'll.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll hang off on that for sure. So, Rick, I guess it's time to go to the mailbag here.
Yeah, let's dig into the mailbag. We've got one question for today because it's kind of a big one. So here we go. Let me go ahead and read it. Ben, who is dad, and Cecil, who is son. Thank you, Ben and Cecil, for tuning into the podcast. Here's their question. They ask, our family is addicted to our cell phones. We know it's a problem, but anytime someone complains about it, we start fighting. Do you have any suggestions on helping us to break our habits? Oh, what a good question, Nick. I want to let you kind of go after this one first, because I think you set such a great example with your family of cell phone usage. And so I imagine you've got some good thoughts to this one.
Yeah, I wish we did better, even still. But over the past several years, especially, I personally have tried to be much more conscious of what that looks like. And Danielle is very adamant, and she's on me to make sure that, we're not on our phones at the dinner table, or not on our phones if we choose an activity that we're doing together.
Yeah.
We've done all the other things, the little things like making sure the charging stands at night are out of the reach of the bed. We haven't gone as far as taking the phones away. However, at the same time, it would be so easy to overcome that. You know what I mean? With smartwatches and iPads and game systems, and we have all the parental control set, and we have the monitoring system set on all of them, and we check all of that, and we do all of that. But in the end, it's similar to what we were talking about with number 35 to a large degree, is that you just have to have a situation in place where you can have trust. You know what I mean? And also have the understanding where the kids understand, we're the ones paying for these devices, and certain things you may do on those devices can actually get your parents in trouble, the person paying for them in trouble. Yeah. And also the responsibility of maintaining the device, something that's that valuable, making sure you don't break it. Or if you do break it, there's a way to understand the severity and consequences of what it costs to repair.
Or lose things it, like right? That. I mean, that's another part of it.
Well, all the time losing it. Yeah, that's definitely, oof. Yeah. And, phones are one thing. AirPods every day, at school, there's lost AirPods. And a lot of times, kids don't want to tell their parents they're lost, so the parents don't know. And, that just becomes a terrible cycle there. There's tons and tons of resources for adults online that are updated constantly that show you what the different, sneaky apps are, and what the social media platforms that you really have to watch out and be careful for, and things like that. But in the end, you also have to make a choice. Like, or hopefully as best you can, your own children, and you have a feel for what's happening, and you're a part of their life to some degree, and they're keeping all of them, especially when they get a little bit older, keeping pieces of their life from you. And that's going to happen. You can't control that, just like you can't control who they hang out with at school. And a lot of times as they get older and have the freedom to drive and things, you can't necessarily control who they hang out with, right? So we try to teach them the right things to do and the right ways to be, but you can't always stay on top of everything. And you're definitely going to lose a lot of those battles. It just is what it is. But it doesn't hurt every once in a while where, when you're on your phone, let's say, and you're scrolling through your Facebook feed, maybe take a pause and say, the next 5 minutes I was going to be on Facebook, I'm going to read about some apps that, kids are using in an inappropriate way, or, I'm going to scroll through and see if I can find a couple ways to find an app where we can engage as a family, you know what I mean? And do like a game app that we all do together. Like, how do we use devices for positives, for good things and whatnot? Another thing that I found important recently for the girls is to show them that a lot of the times, like when I'm on my phone, I'm reading. And like the Apple News app is a good example. We have the Apple one, so you can do the games and the Apple Music, and you have like the whole package there. So a lot of times I'm reading Apple News. That's no different than our grandparents and our parents used to sit and read the newspaper. You know what I mean? You are reading. So, and a lot of times I want the girls to know that. So it's like, I'm not on YouTube or watching TikToks, there's actually something educational, taking place here, and you can kind of share and do that together. And it's just, it's hard because I know that I'm saying these things, and I know that both my girls are easily capable of outsmarting me, you know what I mean? And winning, the battle of evil with social media if they want to, and they're definitely on those devices too much. I was talking with my assistant principals yesterday, and we actually used the Rick Albright example where I was like, hey, you know what you tell them? You say, touch grass. So you touch grass. You got to run outside and, do something outdoorsy on, in the air, actual a real environment for a few minutes or something to that effect. So there's so many pieces to it. We teach a class once a year at school for parents. And even at this point, I'm like, man, it gets outdated. We have to redo that presentation every year because there's always different ways to outsmart us, and there's different dangers that are out there. And people ask, what's 99% of your discipline? And it really comes down to social media most of the time. And, parents not understanding that we can't police that outside of school. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the issues, take place and things. So, I'm kind of like all over the place because I know it's not a great answer.
These are great insights. Ben
and Cecil, you're saying you're addicted, and I have a slight problem with using that term because we look at addiction as something that you have to kick completely, right? Like if you're an alcoholic and you're going to go into sobriety, you can't drink at all. If you're a drug addict and you are going to go into recovery, you can't use drugs at all. Cell phones are ubiquitous. They are an extra appendage and an attachment to us that are never going to go away. That genie is out of the bottle. This is a tool that just about every human being on the planet uses, whether it's that or a computer or something to that effect. It's information at our fingertips all the time. So you just have to find ways to control the overuse perhaps of the cell phone and look at what are the symptoms of this addiction. As you're calling it an addiction, what are the actual symptoms? Well, we don't spend enough time together talking. Okay, well then you make that a priority to do that exact thing. We are we're going to bed way too late. Okay, so we have to figure out a way to minimize use of the device in order to get to bed earlier. So rather than saying we're just going to eliminate the use of phones, it more becomes an issue of what do we want to prioritize that's more important than the phones, and then how do we achieve those priorities together as a family? And you got to decide those things together, right?
Yeah. Oh, great. Nick, that's such great insight. One of the things you said was that genie is out of the bottle, right? We're not going to go back to a world without cell phones, barring a Armageddon type meteor asteroid, or something, hitting the United States or the world. So, but that makes me think, the first thing I thought of was emotions, right? We're not going to get rid of emotions. We just have to regulate emotions, right? Emotions are good. It's just we need to kind of have some kind of control over them so they don't kind of cause problems, right? Disruptive problems for us and for the people we're around. And cell phones in and of themselves are not bad. There's all kinds of benefits and good things, but we do have to have cellular regulation, right? We have to regulate those things to make sure that they work for us, not against us. There's a couple things in that I think Ben and Cecil mentioned in this note that kind of jumped out at me. One was, it says, the way this question is worded is, we know it's a problem. Well, that's half the battle, as they say. I really think that's true. That's great that there's an awareness that this is getting in the way. This is causing us some problems. And hopefully, Ben and Cecil, you're talking for, if there's other people in the family as well, you're talking to everybody, kind of recognizes that there's a problem here. There's something that's kind of getting in the way of kind of what kind of relationship or connections we'd all like to have, or experiences we'd like to have together. So that really is great, right? That's if you have that recognition that there's a problem to work against. The other piece that jumped out at me was when somebody complains about it, we attack each other, right? When somebody complains about it. And so my thinking there is that, when someone complains about it, it sounds like probably attacking another person rather than attacking the problem, right? Because when somebody mentions it, then somebody's aggravated, or to go back to our assets today, probably somebody's acting aggressive rather than kind of assertive, right? And it's triggering people, and then we're all emotional and getting into a fight about it. As opposed to, we're being reactive as opposed to being proactive. And being proactive, I think, Nick, is a lot of things you were talking about. And it's setting boundaries. It's having an understanding of how we're going to approach this thing before we're upset, before somebody's kind of, going after somebody for using it at an inappropriate time. So, and that's something I think that it's not easy. It's hard. I mean, whether you're talking about a family trying to navigate this. I mean, Nick, you mentioned it's challenging for your family. It's absolutely challenging for my family as well. And it's certainly challenging for schools. And I'd love to hear more about that piece, Nick. It sounds like it's really challenging for schools, but I'll finish up what I'm going to say, but I'd love to kind of know what the policies are in your school about cell phone use. But I'll finish up here and then turn it over to you. I think I've mentioned this before in the podcast, and I should have pulled it up to find out how to get to it. But if you just Google cell phone contract with teens, you'll come up with some good stuff. And not necessarily that contract, is signing it in blood or taking it to get notarized. I'm not suggesting that, but I think it's really good to kind of help set some boundaries, use common terminology to understand as a family what we want to do. And if we recognize it's a problem, we're all on board with seeing the value in setting some boundaries, then let's just make sure we're in agreement and clear about what kind of boundaries we want to set. Well, maybe it's a certain time frame or so many hours a day. Or Nick, a great thing you mentioned that we do too in our family is when we're at dinner, there's no cell phones. We're eating together, and the cell phones are not even on the table unless there's an potential emergency. We're not doing that. The other thing, again, because it's a challenge for our family, is we've noticed that with the little kids that I mentioned before, so Toby loves his video games and he loves them too much. and he's not to that age yet where he can kind of regulate that himself. And so we're constantly kind of talking, Christy and I, about how do we help him to regulate that, to get that to a point where he can kind of manage it himself, and what kind of boundaries can we help here lay for him. And so we had a conversation just the other night with him. We decided that he gets dressed in the morning before he plays video games because we're running late to school. And before he's on his tablet, he gets dressed. And the other thing is, once we hit 7:00, no video games, no tablet. We're spending family time. We're watching something on TV. We're having a conversation. We're having a snack together. We're playing a game together. After 7 is family time. It's not until bed is not tablet or video game time. So again, I think it's just a constant process of identifying there's a problem here, and let's all get on the same page and work towards attacking the problem and not each other. So I'm very optimistic for Ben and Cecil and any of their family members that because of what you've said here, that you're only a few steps away of getting this thing under control. And I agree with Nick. Addiction is probably not the right word here. I don't quite know what is, but I think you're going to be in a good position to kind of make a difference that's good for your family. And you can do that without going to a therapist or a family therapist. I think you can do that yourselves by just kind of sitting down, talking about why we think it's important to cut back on the cell phone usage, or how do we put some boundaries about it so we can kind of grow as a family and make sure we're communicating with each other and having not just communicating, that sounds a little counselorish, but so we're having fun together. So we're spending time together and enjoying our family. And I think if you do that and you all get on the same page and kind of agree to some of those boundaries, I think you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, just to touch on what you were asking about, Rick, the policies and things like that. And we never use the word policies because policy is only passed by a school board. But the protocols and procedures in our schools,
gotcha.
We've always had a progressive, forward-thinking central office in that regard. So John Ross and I, who I used to do the Rockstar Principles podcast with, we wrote a lot of articles about how to run BYOD, bring your own device. This is before the push for pretty much everyone having a district device in schools, which is where most places are right now. And we talked about red light, yellow light, green light. So basically red zones, yellow zones, green zones. Red zones are places where you're never allowed to use your technology. The bathroom and the locker rooms are red zones. Okay. Classrooms and hallways tend to be yellow zones, right? So the teacher decides whether or not you're allowed to have your personal device out. That's the yellow zone. Okay. Green zone is where you're always allowed to use the cell phone. So in our school, green zones would be really more times of day. So before homeroom, at the end of the school day, and we let our students have their devices at lunch, which is controversial. However, my pretty strong feeling on that is, and I'll wrap with this. I don't want to go on forever about the what we do in schools, but I think this is something important to me. Is how many years we spent before everyone had a cell phone, working so hard to help that kid who was sitting alone at lunch, right? And we always assume that kid doesn't have any friends, and we assume that kid, and we never really stop to think maybe that kid wants to be alone and they need some decompression time. And it is awkward. It's hard to sit in a room full of people by yourself with nothing to do. So having time where if it's your device that you want to use, that is your time. You should have some autonomy and some rights to handle that time yourself. We're preparing kids for the real world. I've never gone into a workplace cafeteria or a hospital cafeteria or anything like that and seen no cell phones allowed. You know what I mean? And people not able to use their devices. The other thing we see in our cafeteria is tables of kids sitting together at the same table, doing an e-tournament of Fortnite or Rocket League or any one of the millions of games, or kids just playing on the Switch together, the Nintendo Switch together. That is social time too, and we've talked a little bit on the podcast before, kids who do online gaming, sometimes we make fun of people. Oh, yes, you're alone, sitting alone in the basement or your bedroom, online with people. You're online with people. Yeah. You're talking to people. If you're playing I use Call of Duty or, one of those games, that's strategy. You're working either with or against someone in a complex critical thinking environment. I'm not discounting the negatives to, having cell phones in the cafeteria and things, but there's so many benefits as well. I just feel like it's so much easier to go lean towards the positive on this. Yeah. Final point I want to make on this topic is, I read an article about 3 weeks ago, and it didn't really strike me at the time. It was kind of like, this is common sense type stuff, just whatever. It was several new studies, and then someone doing a combination of some studies and their findings and whatnot. But then just a couple days ago, John, who I was just talking about from Rockstar Principles, he said, "Did you read this article?" And I was like, yeah, I read that a couple of weeks ago. Nothing jumped out at me. And he goes, no, did you read this quote? And I reread the quote and realized, oh my God, how did that not strike me in the moment? So I'll read it to you, Rick, and I just want to get your thoughts on it. This particular quote. So here's the statement. Social media overuse among teens may be a symptom, not the cause of depression.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
Social media overuse may be a symptom, not the cause of depression.
Yeah, great point. Great point, without a doubt.
Right? Aren't we blaming? Yeah. We're blaming phones and social media, and we're saying that's causing the depression. This is the reason kids are depressed. Not recognizing that the new studies and a lot of this research is showing that it's a symptom for sure, not the cause necessarily. Kind of smacks me in the face a little bit.
Love that quote, Nick. Let me go ahead and end with another quote, and then maybe we can close things down. I saw this earlier this week in a student's paper, and it really spoke to me. It's probably one that folks have heard before. What we do in this podcast is we talk mostly about kids, right? And setting them up for success. I mean, that's what the 40 developmental assets are all about. When we respond to the wonderful questions that you keep sending in, we're doing our best to share what information that we've gathered over the years from other people, mostly to kind of equip you to make a difference with the kids that are in your life. And this quote really spoke to me. It's from Frederick Douglass. And he said, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Kind of what I was getting at earlier with the old man in the story, right? And neuroplasticity. And yeah, it's not impossible when we get older, but man, it's so much easier. It works so much better. We can have such an impact on kids. Those of us who have committed our lives, right, and our livelihoods to make a difference in kids' lives. Keep going. I know it's frustrating, but it does work. You know it works. And it's probably frustrating because you can also think of kids that it didn't work so well for, but it is working. So keep going.
Well, can't say it any better than that, Rick. And we would ask all of our listeners to join us next week as we hit episode 29. Now listen to the math here, Rick. Episode 29 will be our developmental assets 37 and 38. That means the epic number 30 episode will be the final two assets, 39 and 40. Episode 30 is shaping up to be a mega episode.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's the end of season 1 too, right?
That's the end of season 1. We need special guests.
We might have to. And a cliffhanger.
Yes. Yeah. Ooh, that would be one of us has to get shot.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully nobody has to die.
Not die, but our fate has to be hanging in the balance until the second season. Yeah. And then we have to decide who actually shot us. Like, we're going to need to do some work here.
Or if it was a dream sequence, I don't know. But,
which also is possible. Yeah, I guess that's something to think about. Man, so much to be excited about for all of that. I do want to make one small correction before we sign off, Rick. I said that there were no more scary movies of interest coming out before Halloween. Yeah. Maybe not before Halloween, but before Thanksgiving, there is a rumor that there is going to be a movie released, a sequel called The Corn Man 2.
Oh, I heard this rumor. This is fascinating. Yeah.
Rumors are that some shooting is taking place in Downingtown, that there's been some people trying to get their hands on scripts.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of ideas thrown on the board in the writer's room. So
everybody thought that Corn Man died at the end of the first one, right? That was kind of what everybody assumed, even though you didn't fully see all of that. Just kind of mostly saw the popcorn and stuff, but yeah.
But then there's that little stinger. There's that little stinger at the end that makes you wonder, what happened to Mike there. So I'm just saying, it's, for those of you who haven't seen The Corn Man, just go on YouTube, type in The Corn Man, type in Indeglio, our last name there, and you can watch the feature film.
YouTube? Oh, fantastic.
It's on YouTube, just because it should be everywhere. Yeah, everyone should own a copy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that being said, until next week, keep doing your thing.